Councillors who are here, let me greet the AG, Malulega, and the SG, Statistician General Malulega, and Directors General and all heads of departments, and municipal managers, chief financial officers, and all the other officials from municipalities, the panelists who are going to be speaking to us later, all delegates, and everyone who's here. Let me also join in extending a warm welcome to everyone who's here, joining us either physically, all of you are here, but also those who are joining us virtually. It's been some time since the last gathering of this nature. I think the last summit of local government was in September 2014. But of course, we had hoped to have this summit earlier in our tenure, were it not for COVID. But we're happy that we are here today. Of course, we've had lots of setbacks, COVID, droughts, floods, and of course the global politics also, but we have to soldier on. We intend to use the next 2 days to take stock and score of progress made, but more importantly, to look at how we're going to deal with the challenges that face us, and therefore take this opportunity to reimagine our future. I think the Premier and the other colleagues have started looking at that reimagination of the future. But everything we do, we are local government, and I think I want to say without fear of contradiction that we are the center of the universe of government. If local government succeeds, government succeeds. If local government fails, local government fails. Government fails. So we are the sphere which is at the center of everything, because everything happens at local government level. So, but the Premier said it's not only about the institutions, and he's right. Everything we do in government must be about the people, must be about creating communities or building communities and localities that are resilient, that are sustainable, prosperous, connected, non-sexist, non-racial, climate smart. So at the end of the day, we can say we are succeeding if we build such communities. But fundamental to this is the role of local government, which, as the Premier said, that role is defined in the Constitution. And I want to just repeat it. I know we know it, but we must always remind ourselves that we have a constitutional mandate to provide democratic and accountable government to local communities, to ensure provision of services to communities in a sustainable way, to promote social and economic development, to promote a safe and healthy environment, and to ensure the involvement of communities and community organizations in local development. That's the constitutional mandate that we have. So in fulfilling this mandate, we must also recall the words of the first democratic president in this country. When he was speaking to us in 1996, at the National Summit for Organized Local Government. And what mandate did he give us? And I'll quote, "You have the task of doing whatever is necessary to ensure that our new local government system serves the needs of our communities. You have the responsibility to make their voice heard and to provide an effective instrument for them to improve their lives," close quote. That's the mandate we got in 1996 from Dr. Mandela. So this is the type of leadership and ideal municipality that we should display. It is our hope that this summit will provide and elaborate features and bottom lines and building blocks towards such an ideal municipality. We're also ever so conscious that, as the Premier said and as the MEC said and Umam Mhlaula, we have to work together. And that's not a choice that we have. We have a constitutional mandate to work together. This DDM is not a choice. It's a constitutional mandate because the Constitution again says that the national and the provincial spheres must support and strengthen the capacity of municipalities to manage their own affairs, to exercise their powers, and to perform their functions. So that's the district model, is to actually coordinate that support from the national, the provincial, to support and strengthen local government in an integrated manner that breaks the silos and that mobilizes government and society in planning, budgeting, and implementing as one, and therefore producing that plan that the Premier was talking about, the one plan. So to this end, in this summit, we've invited colleagues from other national departments, organs of state, other state entities, as well as provincial COGTAs and treasuries. There is also much to learn from our friends from other continents, which is why we have the NEPAD agency will be talking to us tomorrow, and we have the People's Republic of China and the Social Republic of Vietnam. And the only reason we chose those, China globally is number one in terms of having lifted millions and millions of people out of poverty. So we need to learn what building blocks they used, what strategies they used to lift people out of poverty. We know that Vietnam went through a very difficult period during the war, and there was the scorched earth, but Vietnam today is a very vibrant economy, so we want to learn from them. We've also invited people from academia, from religion, from institutions of traditional leadership, as you know, private sector, so that we all work together as local government is everybody's business. As we draw lessons and gather directives, we must pay particular attention to the unique circumstances of our history. Because our history, I won't dwell too much on it because I think the Premier has, but we must acknowledge that we inherited a deeply divided society, which was spatially, culturally, socially, economically, environmentally fragmented and divided. So as we try to institute the wall-to-wall municipality system to broaden the reach of the state and ensure that no one is left behind and that everyone has services delivered by the democratic government at the local sphere. But let me say that we did not sufficiently interrogate some of the key assumptions at the time, because we based the funding model on the assumption that every municipality has a revenue base from which to get its revenue and put together its budget. We did not take into account that this wall-to-wall municipality means that we're extending services to people who are indigent. There's high unemployment. So some of the municipalities are not able to raise their own revenue, but they still have to provide services to the communities. So it's something that is under discussion, that the funding model must change. So we hope that that won't take long to change the fund model so that we can better address the aspirations and needs of the local people. And as we have always said, it must always be Batupile. A program director, in charting the implementable, measurable, and time-bound plan of action, we must also pay attention to attendant challenges and context of local government. This analysis will assist us to understand the political, the governance, the financial, the administrative challenges which have often led to substandard service delivery and development, as well as audit outcomes that are not really desirable. We must also acknowledge that a lot of progress has been recorded in certain areas. But also, even with local government and audit, there's been some improvement, modest as it is, that this time we have 54% of municipalities receiving unqualified audits, 16% receiving keen audits. This is not enough, but it shows us that it is possible to get there. So, in fact, maybe we must also look at sometimes twinning the best performing municipalities with those that are not performing so well, and maybe exchange visits, those who are performing well to go to the non-performing and see what's going on there and assist, but also those who are not performing well to go to the well-performing and see what's going on there, and so that we can learn from one another. And of course, we must also pay attention to the municipalities that still have outstanding audits. We have a responsibility to support them, and SALGA and those municipalities that are doing well must also assist. As said by Udada, the ultimate measure should be how we transform the material conditions confronting the masses of the people, especially those in rural areas, townships, and informal settlements. In this regard, since our last summit, we have recorded very notable progress in delivering quality services Yes, 90% of households have access to electricity. Now it's just to make sure that the 10% also has access, but that also that electricity is constant and consistent. We also have progressed in terms of providing sanitation to households. At the beginning, the pace was much faster. Now it's becoming slower. But of course, it is always much more costly and slower to provide services to far-flung areas. For instance, when you look at the Northern Cape, it's much more expensive to provide services in the Northern Cape than it is in Gauteng. It's cheapest to provide services in Gauteng because people are concentrated in a small geographical space. But it's clear that we have also provided water, but not everybody has water. And sometimes those who have water don't have consistent water coming. And also, refuse removal has increased. So there is progress, and I don't think we must also just look at the negative. We must say, yes, this we have done, we must improve on it, but of course there's lots more to be done. And we're doing that with less resources because of the conditions that exist now. But also due to our apartheid spatial planning, as well as the characteristics of our economy, urban municipalities and metros continue to chase a moving target. And they will always chase a moving target if we do not develop the other municipalities. If the other districts are not developed, they don't have vibrant economies, the metros will always be chasing a moving target, not only because of the natural growth of the population, but because people are leaving their areas not out of choice, but out of desperation, thinking that the lights of Gauteng, thinking they might get a house there, a job there, and sometimes they come there and they swell the ranks of the urban poor. So it's very critical that we ensure that there's development everywhere, in every district, in every municipality, because the migration that we are seeing, but that migration as it swells the metros, and the metros don't know what to plan for, because as we sit here, they don't know who will be there in January. But also it denudes the other areas where people are living from. So let's have a balanced local development. And this is urgent because every area has its own endowments, has its own comparative advantage. Let's take advantage of that. And indeed, the white paper says we must have long-term plans, 25-year plans. Because if you plan for now, we are constrained by what is happening around you then. You must break away from your immediate constraint and say, in 25 years, I want to be there. And therefore, in 10 years, I want to be there. In 5 years, I want to be there. In the 1 year, I want to be there. But if you are just fighting fires, you won't develop. So it's very important to have a long-term plans. And those long-term plans will also assist what the Premier is frustrated about. You can see he's very frustrated by these coalitions. Even as he was trying to leave the stage, he came back and talked about that. But what long-term plans do is that they focus everyone. Doesn't matter whether it's me or you or him, when you come, there's a plan to be implemented. And so, even if it's a coalition government, not that we must aim for them, but there is a focus. There is a plan for that district, or there is a plan for that municipality, there is a plan for that metro, and it's a 25-year plan. And so that is very, very important to have a long-term plan. But our plans and strategies must also be rooted in who we are. Because sometimes we pretend as though we didn't have our own indigenous knowledge systems that kept us sustainable and living well before the colonizers came. So we must also look at who we are. Because if you know who you are and you're proud of who you are, then you're likely to succeed. And we celebrate our heritage. This is Heritage Month. So we must celebrate our heritage, our culture, our cultural assets, our cuisines, our fashion, our dance, our song. That's who we are, our soul. We must be able to anchor our plans around some of those indigenous knowledge systems. Even in medicine, it doesn't mean that we didn't have our own health system until the colonizers came. We had. We just haven't developed it, we haven't paid attention to it. But we must also build tourism also on some of our cultural sites and indigenous sites, like Inzalo Yelanga. Some of us may not even know what Inzalo Yelanga is and where it is. It is in Gersibande district. It is the oldest stone calendar in the world. And of course, the sophisticated indigenous science knowledge must also find expression in our plans. The astute knowledge is shown in the buildings, in the art, in the smelter, gold pieces found in the places such as the Great Kingdom of Mapungubwe in the Ven district. And so the rock paintings, there is a lot that we can also build on. And if I were to borrow from something called the email from the future, which was addressed to Kwame in a document of Agenda 2063, the Africa we want. And I quote, "By the intelligent application of centuries-old indigenous knowledge acquired and conserved by African women who have tended crops in all seasons, within the first few years, bumper harvests were being reported. Agronomists consulted women about the qualities of various grains, which have survived low rainfalls, and some which have thrived on wet weather." All these things we knew, they are part of our indigenous knowledge. The social impact of the agrarian revolution must be the most enduring change. The status of women, the tillers of the soil by tradition, the girl child condemned to the future of the kitchen or fields in our too distant past, now must have equal chance of acquiring modern education, owning a farm, owning an agribusiness, owning anything that can be owned, participating in every area of human endeavor. So all this must be driven by the citizens, by young people, by women, by everybody. So I'm really wanting just to stress the indigenous knowledge system, but also our heritage is our country. We have one of the most beautiful countries. There used to be a slogan in tourism in the past in South Africa, which said, South Africa is a world in one country. And I think that is true. We pretty much have everything that the world has. So we have everything that a tourist would want to see. We have breathtaking landscapes. We have beautiful flora and fauna, beautiful roses in Mangaung and elsewhere. We have it all. We must just ensure that we use it wisely and we use it to the advantage of our people. We have the majestic COGTA, which is a World Heritage Site. And we have beautiful rivers and so on, birds. What is it that we don't have? That's what we must look for. Otherwise, we have everything. So we must also look at the ocean as a big economic frontier, because there is a lot that can be done on the ocean. 90% of Africa's import and export is through the maritime highways. So you can see just from that, let alone the coastal tourism, floating tourism, there's even deep sea mining, insurance, there are all sorts of things, logistics. So the vessels that carry things in and out of Africa must be ours. The people who are in those vessels must be our children. So we must also be looking at areas that previously knew no or little development and prioritize them, like this Eastern Seaboard type development. And it mustn't just end with the Eastern Seaboard. It must go to other places, including areas like Mopane, Skukuni, Kenneth Kaunda, and many others. But let me just say a few words around the Eastern Seaboard, which has now been gazetted as a region for the purposes of development. Straddles 2 provinces and 4 districts. And these districts are Alfred Nzo, OR Tambo, Herikwala, and Ugu. And 3 of those districts are amongst the 10 poorest districts in the country. And of course, some of their neighboring districts are also poor, but we must also take advantage of the neighboring districts like eThekwini, Lembe, Krisani, Matole. So this is one of the things that we are busy working with. But we must create these economic and social linkages and complementarities in all our local economies. And it's important in recording the required economic growth and in realizing the goals of the National Development Plan. Program Director, the realization of the goals of the NDP must be anchored on realizing the objectives of an ideal local government. And the realization of an ideal local government will only be attested to by the people themselves. We can't proclaim it. The people must say, yes, now we have an ideal local government. But amongst other things, they must have human settlements that are resilient and sustainable and can withstand disasters and calamities. They must have clean water, dignified sanitation, appropriate greenery. I think we should all work together to green South Africa. You know, you can tell where the rich live and where the poor live just by the vegetation. The rich suburbs are green. So what stops us from planting trees everywhere and in every home, and maybe not planting any tree, maybe we must plant fruit trees in every home, depending on what fruit thrives in that area. So that will also assist in cleaning and maintaining a healthy environment. The African Union has what it calls the Great Green Wall Project, which is trying to push the frontiers of the desert and greening. So we must also be part of that in our own country. And so we must also have citizens who have food. Hunger cannot be part of an ideal municipality. Unemployment cannot be. Women and child abuse cannot be part of an ideal municipality. And people must have access to finance. We're probably the only country in the middle income category which doesn't have local banks, cooperative banks, where money does not circulate in communities. People get it today, it's gone. And therefore, it's very important that we ensure that an ideal local municipality, the money circulates. There are banks, local, cooperative, and other banks that give and access to young people, to women, and to everybody who wants to start up a business. And we must have ideal local government where everybody is connected. If I were to use the example of Rwanda, Rwanda is a small country that had the calamity of the genocide, but they decided that they are going to be the hub of ICT. And they said they will have wall-to-wall 2G coverage. There is no part in Rwanda that is not covered. We must be like that also. It may not necessarily have to be 2G, it can be 3 or whatever, but everybody must have access. And manufacturing. We must be a hub of manufacturing. There is the African free trade. What do you trade if you don't manufacture? So we must. Ideal local government means in districts there must be manufacturing. We have natural resources, we have mineral resources, and we must beneficiate so that we don't export jobs and revenue, so that we can be price callers and not price takers. And of course, our people, the people themselves, must be an integral part of that. So we must say, how do we then, what are the building blocks towards that ideal municipality, where we can say gender-based violence and femicide does not exist anymore. And all of us, you know, Mina, I always say, there are few men who do this. I don't know whether I'm right, Premier. Is it few or is it many? So if there are many, where are the few that don't do it? If there are few, where are the many that don't do it? Because if people are involved in gender-based violence and the other men are quiet, they take it that every man is involved in it. Premier, because we are here, and all the country, because everybody from every corner of the country is here. Let's hear voices of men. It can't be just women alone. Let's hear voices of men. Let's hear men saying no, zero tolerance here of men who abuse women. Let's hear religious leaders saying zero tolerance in this church of men who abuse women. Let's hear traditional leaders saying in this, we are not going to tolerate people who abuse women. Let's speak out. Let's speak out. Otherwise, we assume that everyone is involved. You know, somebody once said that it's not the people who are evil who destroy the world. It's those who keep quiet when evil is being done who destroy the world. So let's not keep quiet when women and children are abused. So I think that I actually look forward to the discussions here, mainly around how we are going to ensure that there's good governance, there's accountability in the municipalities, in the institutions, but also that translates into service delivery, but more importantly, the economic development of every district. But also, there are people or municipalities that get very clean audits, which is very good, but there's a disjuncture between the clean audit and the service delivery. We want both. There must be a clean audit, but there must be service delivery. Some of them cheat. They don't put the poor informal settlements in their plans. So I think we must applaud both. There must be a clean audit and service delivery, not just applaud one. So that's my challenge to all of us. But also, for all this to happen, it has to be done by people. So we must have a capable state. Premier was saying in Italy, it doesn't matter, government changes all the time. But they have strong capacity of the state. Public servants, councils, administrators at local government, everything is strong. So we must ensure that that happens. We must build the capacity of the institutions, of the municipalities. And we must strengthen the culture of accountability, both at the political and at the administrative level. Because when you are accountable, and accountability just starts with small things. When you go to a department that is accountable, or a municipality that is accountable.
The Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, COGTA, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma.